So I'm going to go old school like I do. I was the only one that protested when they took the chalkboards out of our school. Because it just didn't feel right somehow. All right. So what I'm going to talk about is how do you create a world? Now it seems like we have a room full here of people who have created different worlds for LARPs. I'm just going to sort of give you the way that I go about creating worlds. So I've done it a lot in old school Dungeons and Dragons over the years, and now I'm on my second LARP project, which I'm creating a world, just to give you some of the principles that I use to lay it out. Okay, so before beginning to create a world setting in a LARP, I keep 3 priorities in mind. I'll lay out my priorities here.
So cute.
Safety, immersion, and fun. All right. So, the first priority of LARP for me, especially since I'm coming from the reenactment side, where this is like the mania, is safety. If you're going to have combat, if you're going to have close quarters, if you're going to have a lot of, we'll say, overtly sensual or sexual content, safety is your first, right? Your first priority. So you got to figure out, how do you bring the drama? How do you bring the fear? How do you bring the horror? How do you bring the gore? Depending on what you're doing. How do you do that without harming players? And while a lot of LARPs I've seen have really sort of paid attention to how not to stab each other with real knives or something like that, they haven't paid as much attention to the fact that there's a safety issue in that while the realm is fantasy, the emotions are real. And people can get pretty hurt pretty quickly, and we need some sort of mechanism to sort of take them aside and say, yeah, you've been gaming with this character for 2 years, somebody just stabbed you and killed you and now you're done with it, take a break. Sit down over here, we'll talk to you about it. I mean, there's actual bereavement that is involved in some of these long-term characters dying. And often the people running the game just say, oh yeah, whatever, go roll up a new character or something. And they're like, right? So safety is probably my first priority. We want to create a world different from our own, but at the end of the game, they have to go back to their lives. So you don't want them going back wounded or limping unnecessarily, that sort of thing. So a lot of the times, like with Underworld, no light sources, and then players wouldn't bring their own light sources, so we have to make a decision. Do we turn on a big lamp somewhere so that they don't, totally trash each other in the dark? So there's a lot of safety issues involved, and you have to get away from authenticity in order to be safe in some cases. With Albion, we're going to try to have all period cooking, but notoriously, period cooking, people got food poisoning on a regular basis. So we have to sort of draw a sort of line here and try to bring as much authenticity as we can without safety. The second one, of course, is immersion. How do you foster a shared illusion? How do you maintain that suspension of disbelief in a way that is economical in terms of money and time, right? How much realism can we get in there with the time and financial cost? And you have this sort of twofold, especially from the reenactment side, you have this twofold problem that newcomers are worried about looking silly, right? Like if I dress up like this, I have to change my clothes before I go to the, to pick up snacks, and then they get their costume back on because they're just terrified that they're going to look ridiculous. And the veterans are worried about looking lame. So they're like, oh great, nice sneakers. That's their worry. Like they're just told, their mania is for, of all the things, like here you are, a new person, you're like, I worked on this, I worked on this, I worked on that, and they're like, sneakers, really? Thanks for ruining my game. You know what I mean? So it does happen, for real, right? So you gotta sort of, that's one of the things when you're creating a world, you have to have a place for newcomers to come in, right? A way in which they can be integrated into the community. I'll tell you a little bit about how we set that up. And finally, fun. Especially after you put hours and hours and months and weeks preparing rule sets and costumes and props and all these things, and then you get to game and it's like, okay, take a breath. We're supposed to be having fun here. Can we do that? Oh no, we got this, and this gotta happen. You just gotta sort of step back. All the preparation, planning, crafting, writing, the ultimate goal is enjoyment. So when you're creating a world, you want to make it real, you want to make it immersive, but you want to do it in a way that's fun, otherwise why are you doing it? So you gotta always keep that in mind when you're trying to do this, because sometimes, I know as a writer, sometimes, well, my perfectly written world, that's gonna break it. And I have to tell myself, yeah, but they're having fun doing that, and they're enjoying it, and there's lots of people involved in it, and okay, how can we reintegrate it in, rather than just shutting it down because it's not part of my script or something like that. So how do you bring authenticity, drama, realism, conflict, without making players miserable? That's a difficulty. All right. So the first question, once I've sort of dealt with this, the first question I ask myself is, who's my audience? Or what's my player set? What's my demographic? Who is this game going to appeal to? Because if I do all this work and no one plays it, then I'm doing something wrong in a way. So I have to sort of keep in mind. Now the very first talk we had here was a sort of typology of LARPs. I'm going to give it from the opposite direction. I'm going to give what we might call a functional typology. Here's what people are doing in Alberta right now. Given that, how do you make a game that's going to appeal to, we'll say parlor LARPers or boffer LARPers or reenactors or that sort of thing? So I put it across 3 axes. Immersion is one question. What we'll call realism or historicity.
Historicity.
And physicality or combat. And you can locate most of the things that's going on in Alberta with respect to costuming of any sort on these 3 axes. Okay. So for instance, with immersion, how deep is the role playing? How disconnected from the mundane, which is the everyday life? How far removed is that from the reality that players are expected to be in? So things in immersion are things like costume, language. Like there are some LARPs that even want different people from different cultures to speak different languages. Like you said, you learned Elvish in one, right? I mean, that's a deep, deep immersion, which in general, the Alberta experience is not probably going to be all that popular. Living conditions is another one. Some people want to live in warm cabins. Other people say, hey, crap in the woods like a Viking did. Yeah, but I need a shower. Okay, well, there's the immersion break. You got to figure out who you're appealing to. So this is like from, we'll say, the isolated weekend all the way to the absolutely indistinguishable from the mundane, right? And you'll have all kinds of things that are anywhere on this line. If you look down at this end at the mundane, we have, is anyone familiar with the Academy of European Swordsmen?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they dress up in jeans and t-shirts. And the only thing they do that's medieval or reenactment or anything like that is sword fight. Now, they do a fantastic job, but they show up, dressed like that, and they don't really even want you to dress like this, if you can help it, right? That's sort of, they're serious about sword fighting, and that's what they do. So it's like way down on this end of immersion. On the far end, you got things like the one you showed, or like Dumnonia is a good one, Hurstwick, where it's completely, like if they don't have anything on site, right? You have to park your cars far enough away that no one can even accidentally see them, right? You're in that world, everything there is in that world. Now that, we don't have any facilities currently in Alberta that can withhold that, withstand that. There's just not the material culture really to do that. We're trying to build something like that with Albion, but that means, period tenting, which, who has access to that? There's like 3 people. And we want period food, so we're actually getting people to come in and sort of show period food, but obviously most people are going to have prepared stuff and that sort of thing, right? So, Underworld is probably somewhere here, Albion's trying to be here, but we're not, there's just not the player base or the material culture that's going to enable a full immersion at this point.